It started with one sheet of paper that sat in a drawer for the better part of 30 years. The man who finally took it out of that drawer was not Prince William, nor was it King Charles. It was Andrew Parker Bowles, the man Queen Camilla was married to long before the titles, the wedding, or the crown ever entered her life. He requested a private meeting with the king, laid that single sheet of paper on the table between them, and walked back out into the countryside afternoon. 6 weeks later, Prince William signed his name to an administrative document, and by 9 o'clock the next morning, the palace had gone cold in that particular, unmistakable way a room goes cold when something permanent has changed. The first public sign did not arrive as a dramatic statement. It came as an internal memo circulated through the correspondence system, the kind of routine single-page document that normally receives a quick glance, a file folder, and no further thought from administrative staff. But the staff who read this one read it twice, some 3 times, before looking at one another with the expression people wear when they realize a major shift has occurred and no one is cleared to explain it. The memo covered Queen Camilla's household finances, her travel budget, her staffing allocations, and her personal disbursement accounts, the entire operational machine that allows a Queen Consort's office to function. All of it was placed under immediate suspension, pending what the page formally termed a review of expenditure. There was no timeline, no public context, and no explanation, and the signature at the bottom did not belong to Camilla, nor did it belong to Charles. It read, "The Office of the Prince of Wales. A review of expenditure carries no formal legal accusation on its surface." In royal terms, it simply means someone with authority wants to examine the books, but inside an institution where no one except the sovereign had ever reached into the financial arrangements of a queen consort, that bureaucratic phrase carried the weight of a slammed door. By 9 that morning, the corridors had fallen into an anxious silence. Staff moved with careful deliberation, conversations ran short, and while the routine surface rhythms of the household continued, something fundamental was moving at a very different speed underneath. One glaring absence made that silence even louder. Queen Camilla was nowhere to be seen. She had been scheduled for a routine morning appearance, a brief visit to a charitable organization she had supported for years. It was cancelled entirely, not rescheduled or postponed with formal apologies, but removed from the diary without a public statement. Her office door, usually open by 8 in the morning, remained shut. Her personal secretary checked the hallway and left without entering. When a member of her household staff arrived to collect her morning correspondence, the tray was sitting outside untouched, a detail staff noted as unprecedented in her 2 decades of service. Prince William had been seen leaving a private meeting with 2 legal advisers at 7 that morning. By 8:15, his memo was circulating. By 9, the palace understood that an irreversible sequence had been set in motion. What no one in the building had yet pieced together was where it had actually begun, or who had handed the heir to the throne the key to unlock it. To make sense of what William did next, you have to understand the specific lens through which he views the institution. For him, this has never been a simple interpersonal conflict with Camilla as an individual. It has always been rooted in the legacy of Diana. He was 15 years old when he walked behind his mother's coffin under the eyes of a global audience, learning at a formative age how the household operates when official paperwork favors one narrative over another. He spent his adult years ensuring that when major administrative decisions were made, the documentation landed on his desk first. King Charles had known since the previous evening, and those closest to him described the hours following that realization as one of the most taxing stretches of his reign. There were no raised voices or dramatic scenes, simply a sovereign sitting alone with information he could no longer ignore. He cancelled his private dinner that night, a rare break from a routine he almost strictly protects regardless of daily pressures. By morning, aides noted the quiet stillness of a man who had accepted an unavoidable course of events and now had to navigate a full day of public duties. Catherine offered no public comment, maintaining a deliberate, protective distance to ensure nothing could be weaponized or misunderstood. Princess Anne completed her scheduled engagements without deviation, though observers noted her exchanges with staff were characteristically brief and clipped, the mark of a senior royal who recognized the internal silence of the palace and chose to keep her counsel. Meanwhile, two members of Camilla's household office were told their immediate schedules were suspended, leaving them waiting in an anteroom without further administrative context. None of them, however, had witnessed where the sequence actually originated. It had started 6 weeks earlier, through a discreet communication channel that left no entry in the official royal diaries. The message moved via a retired equerry, a veteran of 3 decades of royal service, whose discretion was beyond question. The request was simple yet highly unusual. Andrew Parker Bowles wanted a private audience with the king, on the strict condition that it not be logged, documented, or attended by private secretaries. Charles agreed to the request, recognizing from its structure that his wife's former husband was seeking to pass over a burden he no longer wished to carry alone. The meeting took place on a Wednesday afternoon at a private countryside residence belonging to the retired equerry. Whatever transpired between the two men during that conversation remained strictly between them, but when Charles returned that evening, aides remarked that he looked like a man handed an object he had spent decades hoping he would never have to inspect. Upon returning, Charles did not summon Camilla through formal channels or private secretaries. He sent word through a single staff member, requesting her presence in a small upper-floor sitting room used for sensitive private discussions. When she arrived, there were no official desks or formal seating arrangements, only a low table between 2 chairs, with a single photocopied document resting on the wood where Charles had placed it before her entry. The document bore a date from the mid-1990s, during the interim period immediately following Camilla's divorce from Andrew Parker Bowles and long before her 2005 marriage to Charles. It detailed a private financial arrangement entered into during a decade when she held no official title or crown protection. The writing suggested the use of non-public insights gained through her proximity to royal circles as leverage within a private negotiation. While carrying no legal liability decades later, the page presented a stark record regarding private judgment and institutional trust. Charles did not deliver an accusation. He simply asked her to help him understand the nature of the arrangement detailed on the page. After a long pause, Camilla reframed the document, arguing that the context had been lost and that it represented nothing more than a private negotiation between two people untangling a shared life using ordinary personal insights. Charles listened without interrupting. When she finished, he did not debate her explanation. Instead, he asked a single follow-up question. Did she understand why Andrew Parker Bowles had chosen to bring this document forward now, after nearly 30 years of silence? Camilla did not claim the document was fabricated. Instead, she asked why her former husband would do this to her, an emotional response that provided Charles with the clarity the page itself could not supply. The meeting concluded without a formal resolution or agreed next steps. As Camilla left the room, Charles remained seated, leaving the photocopied document sitting undisturbed on the table. Within 48 hours of that meeting, new administrative instructions arrived at the office of the Keeper of the Privy Purse, the senior official responsible for overseeing royal household finances and the annual public reporting of the sovereign grant. The directive bypassed Camilla's private secretary entirely, arriving through the King's office with Prince William named directly in the authorization chain. It requested an immediate, comprehensive review of all expenditure tied to the Queen Consort's office over the previous 3 years. William standing to participate in this process was grounded in the structural realities of the monarchy. As Duke of Cornwall, a title and vast estate inherited immediately upon Queen Elizabeth II's passing in 2022, William managed one of the largest private property portfolios in the country, granting his office distinct legal and financial independence. When senior legal counsel was consulted regarding the proposed administrative review, the advice was precise. Management of internal household accounts fell entirely within the sovereign's and heir's absolute discretion, requiring no public or external involvement. The practical implementation of these measures followed swiftly. 3 scheduled appearances were removed from Camilla's public diary, with her office citing vague scheduling conflicts without offering replacement dates. 2 staff members within her household office were reassigned to other departments, their desks cleared over a single weekend. Shortly thereafter, the Keeper of the Privy Purse issued formal notices placing an administrative hold on the operational accounts funding her office's daily activities, travel, and staffing requirements. This hold meant that every financial disbursement or travel authorization requested by Camilla's office now required formal approval from Prince William's administrative team. The Queen Consort remained in her role, but her office could no longer deploy resources or execute public scheduling independently. A direct face-to-face meeting between William and Camilla took place shortly thereafter in a private room within the palace. Camilla remained seated as William entered, placing no files or legal binders on the table between them. William spoke quietly, explaining that he had not come to debate the contents of the mid-1990s document or litigate the past. He referenced his childhood memories of the institution's silence, a silence that had once worked to isolate his mother, and stated firmly that he was unwilling to allow internal silence to shield questionable administrative practices any longer. The meeting lasted 20 minutes before William departed, leaving Camilla alone in the room. 3 days later, the family attended a long-scheduled national commemoration service at a major London church, an engagement that could not be cancelled without generating intense speculation. While Charles and Camilla sat in the same row as required by protocol, press observers and cameras immediately noted an unmistakable 18-inch gap of empty wood left between their seats in the pew. William and Catherine sat several rows ahead, maintaining complete composure throughout the service. Following the final hymn, Camilla departed the church early, accompanied by a visibly reduced security detail, as press photographers captured the stark visual distance between the senior royals, a quiet, public signal that the balance of institutional power had permanently shifted. By the time the afternoon light faded over the palace courtyard, the reality of the new arrangement had quietly settled into place. There were no grand declarations, no televised addresses, and no official statements issued to the waiting media. In the long history of the British monarchy, the most significant shifts in authority have rarely announced themselves with noise. They happen through the quiet recalculation of daily administrative boundaries. In the weeks that followed, Queen Camilla's operational presence within the working household continued to recede. She gradually shifted her primary residence to her private country home outside London, away from the immediate orbit of the working palace. Her name remained listed across her long-standing patronages, but the steady stream of invitations and official engagements coordinated through the central household thinned, eventually tapering off almost entirely. King Charles carried on with his public duties with characteristic discipline. The state visits, the red boxes, and the ceremonial appearances continued without interruption. Yet those closest to him noted a subtle change. The energetic curiosity that had long defined his private conversations was noticeably subdued, replaced by the quiet composure of a monarch who had accepted an absolute institutional outcome. For Prince William, the outcome was never about public victory or personal retaliation. By utilizing his legal standing as Duke of Cornwall and enforcing strict financial oversight over household accounts, he demonstrated that the future of the institution would be governed by institutional accountability rather than private arrangements. Queen Camilla retained her title, her place in history, and her crown, but the operational independence, the household budget, and the power to direct her own official future had passed entirely into the hands of the heir to the throne. It stands as a definitive lesson in modern royal power. Titles may grant prestige, but within the modern monarchy, control over the machinery, the accounts, and the paperwork determines who ultimately holds the keys. And as the palace adjusts to this new balance of power, a fresh legal audit inside the Duchy of Cornwall accounts has just flagged a series of private trust inheritance files tied directly to Prince Harry, raising the explosive question of whether Prince William is about to deploy this exact same financial framework to sever the Duke of Sussex's final economic link to the crown.